Okay, I think we are live. So we're just gonna wait for a couple of seconds before we start this session so people can actually join in.
Okay.
Okay, so I guess let's start. Hi everyone, hope you're doing all great and well. Thank you so much for joining this session. And for those who have been with us since the start of the day, we really appreciate your effort and commitment. My name is Suba, and I will be moderating today's session, How to Tackle Online Interviews. I am currently working as the learning lead for the Lahore chapter of PwC. My face might be familiar to some of you if you attended one of the episodes of the learning series, which I've been doing since almost the end of 2020. I do hope that this session is really valuable for all of you, and feel free to post any questions in the comment section as we will be answering all of those in the middle and end of the session as well. Now, let me talk about the motivation behind today's session, and then I will introduce our esteemed speaker for today. So, usually, behavioral interview questions are specific to discovering how an interviewee will act in specific situations and scenarios based on their previous experiences and often logic. It's widely used by interviewers to predict how future performance is going to be, and it's unlikely that you will get through an interview without coming across at least one of these pesky questions which we are going to discuss in today's session. So this is the main reason that we thought that it was so crucial to hold this session for the audience today to better prepare them. Now, our speaker for today is Mr. Muneeb Sheikh. Thank you so much for joining, Muneeb, and taking out the time, especially on a weekend. Let me give a brief introduction about our speaker. So, he's the Chief Operating Officer of Sofstica Solutions. I do hope I'm pronouncing this correctly, but do correct me if I'm wrong. He's working on healthcare and fintech products. Muneeb started as one of the first developers in Kareem back in 2012 and later on moved to Germany for 5 years leading engineering teams and also working with other technology startups in the region. So, over to you, Muneeb. Before we start off with the questions, if you would like to tell us more about yourself and your motivation behind signing up for the session today, then we would love to hear that.
Yeah, thank you, Tuba. So I'm really excited to share like the real insights, how we observe और किस तरीके से like we take interviews and we observe candidates and like telling everything behind the scenes. So just to make sure I mean, this is kind of the opportunity for all the candidates who are listening right now to really understand the ideas behind questions that are asked during the interview. And I hope like this will help them prepare themselves better for their upcoming opportunities.
Great, thank you. So I think we do have a list of questions prepared today. You know, which mostly people would like to ask you. So I think let's start with them one by one, and we can then tackle all of those. So, firstly, what are behavioral interviews? If you could just define it in a way for people who are not aware or, who haven't even given one interview and just starting out to give interviews. And then also maybe talk about briefly what is the goal of behavioral interviews? What do the hiring managers want to actually assess through these interviews?
So I mean, one thing which is very important during behavioral interviews is to assess the person, how the person would act, react at different situations in the organization at different times. It's really to understand कि हमारा देख जो भी कंपनी की डायनेमिक्स हैं और जो भी स्पेक्ट्रम है काम करने का, um, so like when a certain employee comes under different situations, for example, like it could be maybe like a stressful situation, कोई delivery है, it's more about working with the team के अंदर collaboration में कितना effective है. Or even then, there are always positive and negative situations comes in an organization. And किस तरह से कोई employee उसके अंदर या कोई person उसको gracefully handle करता है situation को, and lead to positive outcomes rather than negative ones. So basically, the ability to handle like situations through our behavior, um, in different situations in an organization. So I think that's mostly about it. जब हम कहते हैं कि भाई what are behavioral interviews? So behavioral interviews के अंदर um, like जो assessment है that comes around along these lines. और जो उसका एक्चुअल गोल होता है वो यही होता है कि वी आर एबल टू आइडेंटिफाई कि लाइक हाउ द पर्सन वुड बी, आई मीन एंड दिस इज रिगार्डलेस हाउ टेक्निकली साउंड द पर्सन. तो अगर कोई बंदा लाइक या कोई एनी पर्सन, if he or she is very sound in technology or like in a skill set, but I mean, if it turns out for during the assessment, like this person is not a good fit or is not a good team player, for example, or there are like other things that might affect the team performance. So usually, like this is kind of something that they think about to proceed or not.
That makes sense. Another question which I would actually like to ask, is there any difference between this section of behavioral interviews in Pakistan and outside of Pakistan? As in, like Pakistan में जो जितने भी hiring managers होते हैं, how much emphasis and importance they put on behavioral interviews as compared to hiring managers from companies outside of Pakistan, because this will really help the candidates prepare accordingly जो कि पाकिस्तान में companies में apply कर रहे हैं, and also who are applying to companies outside of Pakistan. So is there any difference? What are the kind of similarities?
So, I mean, there are different approaches but taken by different organizations. Um, some organizations can that it's specifically like there is a set of interviews like 5 to 7 interviews, that goes to starting from let's say an HR interview, and then there are 3 rounds of technical interviews, and then there is like two more like one of them is maybe a behavior dedicated interview. But I would say like a behavior aspect goes through all the interviews with each of the employee. It's not कि इसके अंदर ये किसी एक इंटरव्यू में ही आपको असेस करना है, but like the interviewer is assessing behavior aspects pretty much in all the interviews you take. So in Pakistan, specifically to your question, in Pakistan there are different behaviors. There are some companies who has like one additional interview other than just technical interviews. But I don't think like there are so many of them जहाँ पे like 3 4 interview एक साथ हो रहे हैं. So usually it's more like there are one or two technical interviews and then there's an HR interview. Um, but there are also organizations जहाँ पे like there are probably one interview or two interviews. Like, I mean, there are two interviews. Mostly they are like a hybrid interview. So let's say it's technical as well as behavioral. So like all questions are kind of merged together. Um, so I mean, yeah, it's kind of. But in I mean, Pakistan se bahar, there are definitely dedicated interviews. That includes behavioral aspect. I mean, they focus on that. But the Pakistan can that it's very much kind of combined together in one or two short interviews.
Okay, so basically it depends from employer to employer. Like in Pakistan mein, the trend is changing. Now people are definitely focusing on behavioral interviews as well and not the technical aspect, which used to happen years ago. Okay, so I think we do have questions from the audience. So let's also start to answer them. The first question is, what are the interviewers looking for when they are looking for a culture fit? This confuses me.
Right. So actually, every organization has their own culture. Usually, it doesn't change much from organization to organization. But there are a few general things जो pretty much every organization is fundamentally based on. Um, One of them is teamwork, let's say. And I mean, this goes beyond saying, कि, without a teamwork, an organization cannot run. So let's say if like hypothetically speaking, like if a person is not a team player, and this means that maybe the person believes in doing something all alone, or he enjoys doing everything on his own, or it doesn't collaborate with other people. Um, Regardless how good the person is, like technically, it will give a difficult time for other engineering members to work with that person. And I think this is one aspect that comes in culture fit. But there are so many other aspects um, that a person can exhibit and not be part of the culture for that company. But I mean, usually, like for example, in Softica, um, we have like our chief happiness officer, and the only purpose, or like the people person, for example, you can say in other companies, and one of the only reasons why we have this such an important uh, designation in the company is to make sure like we reach out to each and everybody, understands their concern, and improves over time. So we so I mean, like, to just to improve the culture. And if we have I mean, if an organization have a toxic culture, nobody would like to work there. So I think culture is a very important aspect of any company, regardless of how good or sound the product it is. Because if you don't like working there, you are spending like more than 8 hours of your day in that company, and if you're not enjoying those 8 hours, it would become very difficult for you to be productive first, but also you would not enjoy at the same time. So, I mean, being culture fit is important. Um, so I hope like that answers her question. But there are so many other aspects than just not being a team player. And I mean, we can talk about that later on because that is part of our questions.
Okay. Thank you for answering that. We can take another question. Fatma Ali is asking that can we also ask questions about general interviews which aren't necessarily relevant to behavioral interviews?
Yeah, sure. Feel free.
Okay.
I mean, if there are any other questions they have, yeah, they can ask.
Okay. The next question we have is how to answer why do you want to switch the previous job? This is by Sameed Mehta.
Yeah, I think this is one, like, a very frequently asked question. And to be honest, like, on this question, the person or the interviewer is trying to understand your real reason behind moving to a new opportunity. And um, I mean, we can just be honest. I mean, whoever the person is giving the interview, they can be honest in, like, for example, if they do not have a learning curve, for example, or they're not learning a lot, or like, for example, they're not enjoying it anymore, that technology, they can mention that, that is probably one of the reasons. But there could be many other reasons. Like, if you are moving from one company to another, maybe because you want some kind of um, you are mostly intrigued maybe by the compensation, or I mean, there could be reasons that it's an exciting product, or it's a different technology vertical that you are interested in. So for example, you are working on products or projects that are based on transportation industry, and now you maybe want to move on, let's say aerospace, or I don't know, like fintech or banking or anything else, right? So I mean, different people have different motivations to move from one job to another job. And if an employer or if an interviewer asks that question, I mean, we can just share our real motivation behind moving from one job to another. And that at least gives them the understanding that the energy and passion you have for something. Because sometimes, like, aapke paas, you have a candidate that tells, like, They are mostly interested in doing XYZ technology over the other one because they are legacy technologies and they do not fit that. I mean, it's aligned with their career goals, etc. So I think uh, like the right answer is to just share the honest opinion. I mean, honest like reason behind switching a job.
Yes, and I think usually people are really hesitant and afraid to share the answer to this question is because mostly I'm not sure how true is it at this point in time in the industry, but it's considered bad or looked down upon if you are changing jobs frequently as well, right? Some hiring managers do look down upon that and don't consider it a good thing, which is why probably people are hesitant to change jobs in the first place. And then when they're asked later about in the interviews that why did they change jobs so frequently, and as you mentioned, there can be a lot of reasons. Some might arise from personal reasons, if someone is moving to a different location, if there is not enough opportunities at the current company. So yeah, but I think
And
that's one of the
yeah,
reasons
just
that
wanted to add
people.
one exactly. So just wanted to add one more thing to the conversation. So like a lot of people or candidates want to switch their jobs frequently. I mean that is different than why somebody moved from a previous. I mean want to switch from previous role because if you're switching jobs frequently, let's say, I mean, there could be genuine reasons, but there are also sometimes other factors that maybe not so much justify the moving from one position to another. So let's say if a person says, "I was working on X technology, and and I wanted to change that, but now I'm working still on the same X technology in the new job." So I mean that didn't justify why did you move in the first place because since you have to work with the same technology in the new company again. Um, and also from the company's perspective, it's probably not um, a healthy behavior for a person to exhibit if they're like quickly moving from one role to another because um, like when a company is building product or projects, usually it's not something like that can be done in 15 days or 30 days and the work is done and then now you can move to a new role. Usually our projects are like 3 to 6 months to year to 2 years, right? And that requires somebody to understand the domain knowledge of a product and then work with the team and then learn new things that are required for that role and then being productive at some point in time. um, मगर अगर like somebody comes in a team, I mean they join as a team, उन्होंने domain knowledge ली product की, let's say somebody was working in the transportation industry and then they joins a product which is working in underlying banking operations. So I mean there are some banking knowledge that they needs to grasp. और जब वो उस पे काम करेंगे उसको लर्न करेंगे शुरू के 1.5 2 3 महीने वो उसी को सीखेंगे and then they just move on to a new role. So I mean it's not helpful for the person anyways and it's not helping the company either. So it sounded like he- the person was in the wrong place at the wrong time. So I mean it's very important like when you apply for a role, um, see it this way what do you actually want to do and if the job description that is available to you, if it aligns to your future goals, let's say 1 year down the road, what do you see yourself? एंड अगर आपने अपना आपकी अलाइनमेंट हो रही है उस जॉब रो से तो देन गो फॉर इट. एंड अगर आपको लगता है कि दिस इज समथिंग दैट यू डू नॉट एंजॉय और so then I mean you join the company and then you still would not be happy and then you end up moving to a new company in 2 3 months. So I think I mean, it puts not a very good impression on your resume. So you have to make maybe you come up with an excuse the next time, the first 1 or 2 time, right? And somehow I think it's not helping the company either because they invest time in you as well, believing that you are the right candidate, but you then yourself not sure. So I think yeah, in short, I think switching jobs very quickly is not a good idea. But also from the candidate side, I mean, there can be genuine reasons why somebody wants to move very quickly, and that's okay. But there are so many other reasons it might not be okay as well.
Okay. So now I think let's talk about some of the most common or important behavioral questions which you think that the candidates should be prepared for, and then after listing maybe top 3 to 4 questions, we can discuss about how to answer and what techniques can the candidates use, or what would you recommend them to use to answer these questions.
So there are a couple of techniques. I mean, it's not techniques, and there are no shortcuts to really ace a behavioral interview. Um, the one thing is that we I mean everybody needs to understand is because like even somebody aced the interview, they and they would exhibit different kinds of behavioral patterns while working in the team, then that's still not good for the persons, right? um, तो यहाँ पर सबसे इम्पोर्टेंट चीज ये है कि सबसे पहले आप ये आइडेंटिफाई कर लें कि what are your key qualities, and if there are things that can be improved. So I think everybody can work on that. So one approach is, for example, like generally in companies it's mostly teamwork, and in our software industry they are like if you're joining a backend team, then there is a front end team, there is a mobile team, there is a lot of back and forth collaboration going on. And like for that is something that everybody should be prepared for. So अगर यहाँ अगर कोई भी engineer कोई candidate है and like during the interview it appears that that person is not collaborative, or that person is not um, does not want to work with team, right? And that's probably their preference, they want to work standalone. And the company has a different culture. I mean, I don't think there's any point for like if that person to join that company, because then it's not a culture fit for both of them. So I in general हम जितने भी candidates interview में जाते हैं, they need to think like what and how the company operates, so they can ask questions even before the interview कि आपका culture कैसा है, like किस तरह team काम कर रही है, आप किस तरह की policies हैं around the team. And they can ask these questions early on with the HR as well, to really understand like what kind of environment there is, they can be like questions about किस तरह की technologies हो रही हैं, tools किस तरह use हो रहे हैं, collaboration किस तरह हो रही है, and so on and so forth. But during the interview, जब आपसे कोई क्वेश्चन होता है, फॉर एग्जाम्पल लाइक किस तरह का एक्सपीरियंस था आपका लास्ट कंपनी में व्हेन यू हैड अ कॉन्फ्लिक्ट विद सम अदर पर्सन. So usually what the interviewer is trying to understand कि आप उस सिचुएशन में कैसे पहुंचे, आपका क्या रोल था, और आपने उसमें क्या एक्शन लिया, और व्हाट रिजल्ट वाज देयर. I mean, classically, like in theory, they say it's a star pattern. Then you are in the situation, and what task you had, and then what action you performed, and what was the result out of it. So, I mean, for example, you can tell, okay, like there was this situation I was working in. It's like time pressure, whatever there is, right? And your role was maybe to manage the employees, or your role was maybe to collaborate, or you were in part of the backend team, front end team, etc. And like that's how some kind of conflict happened, and then what you did. um I mean, again, it's पूरे सिनेरियो के अंदर, like अगर इस तरह का क्वेश्चन होता है सिनेरियो बेस्ड, you can define the scenario, you can explain the situation, and then you can explain your role as well कि as an individual मेरा रोल ये था, and I did this is was my best effort, और इस तरह से like टीम को फायदा हुआ at the end of the day, या if this lead to positive outcome, या successful project completion, etc. So I think this is one approach of taking like questions that are very much behavioral during the interviews. But still, like that ये answer भी जो है, I mean, you cannot make this answer and pass this out, because like it would, if the answer is contradicting to your personal behavior, so there is no cheat sheet. That's what I'm trying to say. I mean, like we all have to understand that. Um, I mean, even if there are some lackings, we can always improve on. So that's not what I'm trying to say here. But the important thing is that we just need to realize, like, working under pressure, being humble about, um, like, for example, there are some situations where like we experience, okay, there is somebody who is very good technically, and they have like a lot of good experience, but they are somehow not able to like mentor their juniors, or they are not able to work with their juniors, and they feel like, let's say maybe more of a situation where they do not want to collaborate with other person. I mean, in that situations, it's very difficult for, like, a team to work together. um, so I think that's part of the person's behavior, and yeah, that can be improved, and so on.
Okay, so to sum it up, questions can revolve around teamwork, conflict. If someone experienced conflict in a team or not, how they tackled it, and I think it can also involve around leadership if they get to work on a project which they were leading, or maybe some other example through which they can demonstrate their leadership qualities. I think that would be great as well. So now talking about the answer. So we have covered the part in terms of how to answer these behavioral questions, but how exactly, how precise should the answer be? Should one go into as much detail as they can, or should it be very brief? Because of course the interview time is limited. So can you maybe give an idea of how long the answer should be? Maybe it should be under 1 minute, 2 minutes, 5 minutes. How much details should the participants or the interviewees indulge in?
So, like, it's it's not easy to answer, but in a certain way, like, अगर आपसे कोई question ऐसा होता है, and जिसके अंदर they are asking about, like, let's say, what was the conflict you had in your last company, and how did you resolve? um I mean, this question around, I mean, the only way you can answer this question is to explain the situation first. Because अगर आपने situation ही explain नहीं करी, you would not be able to communicate your interviewer के like वो क्या उसमें से what would be the takeaway from your answer, right? तो पहले तो आप उसको situation explain करें, and I mean, like, give enough information so that they can understand the scenario. um, and the next step would be कि आप जो है, like, you tell your actions, what was your role in that situation. um, जब आप अपना role define कर देंगे, and then you explain what are your actions, and then उस पूरे action और scenario से क्या outcome निकला, and how did you resolve the situation, like what was the outcome, yeah, like what was the success. Try to be positive, like, like, you want to highlight the positive things, or not to make, I'm not saying make up positive things, but like, जो positive actions हुए, ये positive yield हुई, आप वो highlight करें, so that they are easy, it's easier for the interviewer to understand कि, like, what was the landing of the entire situation. So I think, like, it can be covered in maybe 2-3 minutes, or let's say 5 minutes at max, but I think a overall understanding of the scenario is important.
Yes, and I think it's usually a conversation. It's not like that you are asked a question and then you go and ramble about that. It's usually a conversation. So if the interviewer is going to think that you are preparing for it for very long, and they want you to explain it in a brief manner, I think they'll definitely communicate to you. So I guess just look for hints, and that should work. Okay. Another question which we have is that about these examples. Can these examples be from work? Can so the question is that, is it necessary that these examples have to be from work, or can they be outside of work, such as from volunteer work? If someone wants to communicate about the personal impact they had, or they were leading a volunteer work or a volunteer project, uh, should they talk about it, or should they always prioritize giving examples from their work?
I think it's not only that. I mean, if they have examples from any situation of their life, they can share it. I can just give you an example that, there was a candidate I was interviewing, and that person wanted to run a marathon, and he was explaining about his situation that, he wasn't able to run the complete marathon, um, due to XYZ injury that he got. But then he was so much focused and so much, passionate about completing a marathon, that, he practiced continuously in the following year, and he ran the marathon the next time he had the chance. I mean, in this situation, at least it gives an example that, that the person is consistent. I mean, to take on a challenge and complete his challenge, regardless of the failures he got. Right. So I mean, it's still a behavioral part, um, and it gives a positive impression that, that the person was able to achieve his goals at the same time, like the challenges he met during the course or the journey. So I mean, it's not necessary that आप अपने past employers की ही example दो, आप अपने real life examples भी दे सकते हैं. I mean, if it's relevant, of course.
Okay. And what about if someone has an experience of, let's suppose, 7 to 10 years in the industry, and they're applying for another job? Of course, they will have a lot of projects to talk about. Should they talk about the recent projects, or they can talk about any of the projects they want to? इसमें कोई preference है? Things which hiring managers prefer hearing about?
I think it really depends. Sometimes, like, if it's a position about, let's say, backend development or engineering, or I mean, the questions in the interview are more about um, engineering best practices. So I think the most relevant project the person should be talking about, where they have achieved like a very solid, or they exhibited like very good engineering practices in XYZ project. So this project maybe आपने अच्छा काम किया है, then you would want to tell more about that, because then you have learned so many things over the years, and then you put all those in one that project, and you want to tell the person that you were capable of doing like all these good, or put all these good best practices in one project. So I think it depends on a question to question. I mean, another example could be that, what is the most relevant thing your interviewer would want to listen. Like, if they are asking questions based on your technical ability, then you want to answer, or give example projects that describes the best of your technical abilities, right? It's If it's a behavioral question, then you want to give exact situations where you think was one of the best behavioral moments you had, right? So I think, yeah, it depends on question to question, and yeah, then you can just give the relevant answer.
Okay, we do have another question. I think we have covered some part of it, but if you want to add anything to that, we can do that. Fatma Ali is asking that what is the unspoken behavior? Would be great if you talk about skills as well of fresh graduates.
So I think for fresh graduates, one of the important skills that companies look for is that they have the ability to learn and grow. Um, so because जब कोई fresh graduate किसी company को या team को join करता है, the company would really want okay, that person joins the team, and they have an idea, like, that person based जिस तरह आपकी personal motivation होती है कि मैं इस टीम में grow करना चाहता हूँ, या मैं चाहती हूँ, and like, या मैं इस डिपार्टमेंट में, या मैं ये टेक्निकल स्किल सीखना चाहता हूँ, तो like they company puts you in there, um, but the one thing that they really want that person grows and learns quickly, or their ability to learn. So I think that is one skill during the interview they're looking for, when usually fresh graduates are interviewing. Also at the same time, like, your ability to work or like आप खुद क्या करना चाहते हो सीखने के लिए, that's also important because it's not like कि आपको सारी information जो है वो like it's the transfer of knowledge is not something like आपको easily मिल गई या like it's something कि आपने घोल के पी ली, but it's more like a you आपको you have to be like passionate about learning something, आप अपनी भी personal research कर रहे हो या कर रही हो, and then you are also working with the team and then you are gaining that experience as well. um, I mean that ability is important for all the fresh graduates to really show their eagerness and their own effort as well while they're learning. So I think this is one thing that is very important.
ओके, सो सिंस बहुत सारे लोग एक ही पोजीशन के लिए अप्लाई कर रहे होते हैं, एवरी वन इज इंथुजियास्टिक इन टर्म्स ऑफ शोइंग हाउ कमिटेड दे आर to the role and how eager they are to learn. So how does one stand out? What are the kind of candidates that stands out for you? If you could just point out main skills or maybe main aspects which the candidates should focus on, because obviously everyone is applying, they are going to talk about the best projects they have worked on, they are going to talk about their best abilities and how they did the project, or maybe what kind of impact they had. So stand out kaise kare, because obviously not everyone can be hired. So yeah.
So I think in engineering, for example, there are a couple of things that makes you stand out from a lot of profiles. So I mean, if it's programming or engineering, you can have some of your portfolio projects. You can contribute to open source projects. So generally GitHub के ऊपर open source projects हैं. You can just go there, and there are so many bugs usually. Like बड़ी बड़ी libraries होती हैं. There are like even small bugs and big bugs. आप जाएं वहाँ पे, like you understand their problem, आप उस patch करें, like you fix that bug and then you submit a patch request, and then they would submit it. So it's more like, because open source is like a community of developers working in a certain library, and that is one of your achievements, because I mean, as I see more and more profiles, not everyone does that. So it definitely, I mean, I mean that kind of profiles definitely stand out. It's also more about if you are active on a certain community, let's say Stack Overflow, and you have an understanding or an in-depth understanding of certain technical topics, तो आप कितना community में help कर रहे हो और support कर रहे हो. So I think like those kind of profiles also stand out. Um, I mean, it directly shows the recruiter that you are actively engaged in learning or contributing, and it really highlights a very positive aspect of your profile. Yeah, so I think this is something that's very much missing. Even like even for undergrads or graduate students, they can find some time. They can find like small libraries, जो कि community driven है, and they can just make contributions to that. And I think that's also very rewarding for them personally as well, that their work is attributed with all the other developers out there in the industry.
Yes, so basically, just a way to show that they're willing to learn more, and they could do that
Yeah,
through, doing online projects, putting them on GitHub, or fixing bugs in the open source library. So there can be different ways. I think whichever they feel they're able to do, they
yeah.
should do that. Okay. Another question which we have is कि जो fresh graduates होते हैं, obviously they don't have any previous job experience, right? Professionally कोई experience नहीं होता, तो what should they cover in behavioral interviews? कि वो which kind of experiences can they talk about, since they have limited exposure, unless someone did an internship in their senior year on the or their junior year. But what about people who did not get the opportunity to do an internship, which mostly happens? So what should they cover during these interviews? What can they talk about?
हाँ, so actually it's not really about कि आप अपनी like last job के मुतालिक की बात करें. or you share experiences like, you can just share experiences from your personal life, from your university projects, from your collaboration in your final year project. How did that go? I mean, there are so many aspects that we encounter on everyday life, and then they can just share some of those aspects. Um, but again, like it's in behavior interview, it's mostly ये नहीं होता कि like you have to share like everything. Yeah, I mean the answers are very much tailored to questions. So there are so many experiences we experience during every day. Um, so I mean, like when the question is asked, you can just find the right piece of example, the right piece of observation that you want to share, and you can just go for it. So I don't think कि ये कोई भी behavioral question का आंसर सिर्फ last experience से ही है. It can be from anywhere outside as well.
Okay. Okay, that sounds fine. I think now let's discuss about a real example. Just now you mentioned that one of the methods that the people who are applying for jobs they could use is the star method. So if you could just make up a dummy example, or maybe if you could think of an example which you encountered during taking interviews, or maybe you giving your interview yourself at some point as well, of a work related example and one non work related example, and how can the candidates talk about it in a star method. So maybe if we can cover that step by step so everyone is able to understand that exactly what should an answer contain and how to properly structure it.
Right. So, I mean, it's important to like, let's say, understand practice it. But the star is more about like it's a situation, your task, and your action and the result. So आप किसी भी सिचुएशन को इन चार एरियाज में ब्रेक डाउन करते हैं, एंड देन आप पहले तो सिचुएशन बताते हैं कि फॉर एग्जांपल इफ आई go into a situation, let's say, um, a situation could be that, maybe there is a merger going on in the company, and like, let's say two employees from company A and company B are merging together and forming a single entity. So, I mean, let's say this is a kind of a classical situation जहाँ पे ये situation है actually में. And then it could be that these two companies जो के operate कर रही थी independently in the past, now when they are working together there is like kind of um, conflicts of different working styles. Maybe they have different policies and company B has different policies. Now like they're coming closer, and then like which policy to work and which is the right thing, and etc. And all of that situation has to come at the end, like it's like there needs to be like one collaboration. And like उस पूरी situation के अंदर like आप like आपका क्या role है, what is your task in there. And let's say you are the manager who has the responsibility to have a successful merger, and like redefining the entire policy structure, and like एक pattern पे आ जाए सारे employees दोनों companies के. So like आपके like now this is your task role and you have defined the situation. So what action have you taken at this role? So let's say you went through all the employees, you bring them all together, and then you have a session together. Um, you listen everybody's inputs, like पूरे team के आपने input लिए, and then you form a policy together कि like everybody is on board on one single idea, like how we would operate moving forward. So you hear everybody's ideas, and like let's say you run a poll, and then there are so many different techniques that you can do. And at the end of the day आपने individual feedback भी लिया, आपने team का collaborative feedback भी लिया, and then based on that all feedback, like if all the team members are on board in one single idea. So this is the action you took. I mean, there can be multiple results. The result could be that the merger happened on time, like the successful completion जो हो गई जो task है वो आपका on time complete हो गया. It could also mean कि the new policy that you built together with the team, you yielded like, performance improvement, or like, the happiness level of the employee. Employees are more happier than before. So, I mean, there can be many positive aspects that can come out of this entire exercise. So, I think, yeah, that kind of, this is kind of a made up example, by the way. But it can be really true in the professional environment.
Okay, yep, that was pretty helpful. And yeah, I think you did break it down very clearly into different steps. So this is an example from work. Could you think of also another example which is non-work related?
Yeah, sure. So, non-work related could go in very similar fashion. So, let's say you are, let's say, a captain of a cricket team, right? And then there could be a situation where there is a conflict in within your team, and some player wants to be a batsman and somebody wants to be a bowler, and but like they're conflicting each other, and then there are different ideas, and you want everybody to be on board at one single page, right? So then again, like if you are a captain, or so आपने क्या actions लिए, so you have I mean, a situation where there is a, let's say, a conflict, or whatever it is, and then you, like, what actions you took to fix that behavior. Maybe you went through one-on-one sessions with all the employees, or with not employees, like your team players, or you had a collaborative session. I mean, whatever way you figure, I mean, find out to really fix that problem. That those are the actions you took, right? And in the end, like, what was the output of all the effort you did, right? Maybe you went to play on the next cricket league or next match, or whatever it is. So, like, what are the results out of those actions? So, yeah, I think it can be implemented in any scenario.
Okay. So we have covered a lot of questions, right? One of the most frequently questions that we do get is that people want to know how long should they prepare for and how many examples should they keep ready. For example, if we are talking about behavioral questions, they could be from, talking about leadership qualities, conflict, being a team player, or demonstrating examples where it shows that how to treat a complicated problem. So should the examples be covered from all the areas, or should the candidates pick a few of examples and then prepare for them? How does it go about specifically in Pakistan?
Right. So I think one thing which is important to really think, and I think अक्सर ये हम शायद नहीं भी सोचते इस तरह से कि we all go through different scenarios at universities, in projects, in classes, or different subjects. And if we start thinking more objectively, okay, like, what were my challenges during this exercise? What were my challenges during this role, और इस पूरे सेमेस्टर के अंदर मेरे सबसे बड़े challenges क्या थे? It could be a time management, कि ये मेरा सबसे बड़ा चैलेंज था कि मैं टाइम किस तरह मैनेज करूं. It could be maybe कि like ये सब्जेक्ट की मेरे पास बहुत ज्यादा बैकग्राउंड इन डेप्थ अंडरस्टैंडिंग नहीं थी, मुझे एक्स्ट्रा आवर्स बैठ के सीखना पड़ा. So I like, if we start categorizing our efforts wherever we put, चाहे वो स्टडीज में हो, चाहे वो जॉब रिलेटेड हो, चाहे वो प्रोजेक्ट रिलेटेड हो, like in anywhere, and if we start defining the challenges we have met, then it's very easy to explain such or answer these questions during the interview. So, like if an interviewer asks a question that is related to time management, then you can explain them, because, like, time management, pretty much all of us, like, during our study sessions in universities, have to go through this time management practice, because there is limited time, there is I mean, there is an exams coming up, there is like quizzes, etc. किस तरह prepare करें, इतने सारे topics and all those, right? So I think for fresh graduates, it's very, um, I mean, in a way, it's they have a lot of areas to really find out really good examples, which are personal and true. Like they don't have to make up examples. They are honest examples where they have worked on, and they can really show their positive sides by just finding out the challenges they have met and how did they address them. So, like, again, then like it could be from the education studies, from even like from sports, from running, like, from exercising, or like, being fit, and anything that they have like overcome their like self behavior, and they have improved on that. They can like just show I mean, tell so many examples from their personal lives, which are like, true for them.
Right. Now, for some people, we know that these interviews can be extremely stressful because some people do have issues with anxiety. So, is it okay that during an interview, if someone is having a panic attack, or they're thinking that they could do better, but they are having a lot of anxiety due to which they might need a minute for a pause. So, is it okay for them to communicate this to the hiring manager or someone who is interviewing them, or should they just ignore it and continue regardless of it? So, what's the expectation around that?
I think at any point in time, I think it's a very good question. At any point in time, अगर आपको break लेनी है, or if you, I mean, like, I mean, any kind of break, I think you should be able to feel free to ask that you need a break. Um, like it can be a water break, it can be like, just going out for like, like for any productive break. That's what I'm trying to say here. Because during the interview, and especially at Softica as well, um, um, our interviewers, or like, we are not there to trick the person, or ask them difficult questions. We are there to help them succeed. We are there to help them being succeed in the interview process. So ऐसा idea, ये ideology नहीं होती interviewer की, and I think in other companies as well, um, कि they do not want to like trip them off, or like, ask them tricky questions so they can fail the interview. So actually, it's more help. I mean, they just want to be helpful so that they can do the best in the interview. So again, like, specific to your question, if they want to take a break, I think that's okay to ask. If they want to take a break, and on the contrary, like, during the interview, there are times जहाँ पे like, there is an engineering problem and somebody is trying to solve that engineering problem, and होता ये है कि like, that person is like maybe ending up in the wrong solution, or they're not able to solve the problem completely. So मतलब during the interview, we try to give kind of hints, or helpful tips that how they can like, navigate from the wrong answer or the wrong direction to the right direction, and like, just to make help the person to really solve the problem successfully. So I think interviews, I mean, the people who are going for interview, they should not think okay, these interviews are designed to make them fail, but rather think in this way that these interviews are designed to make them succeed. And I think that's what we do at Softic at least, and we believe that I think that's what probably should other companies do as well. Um, yeah,
Yes, so basically, the gist of the answer is that the hiring managers and the interviewers are actually rooting for the candidates to succeed. So they should just focus on that. They're not going to ask trick questions just for them to fail. They're there to help them out, and in case someone is finding it difficult to answer, or they might want a break to have some water and calm down a bit, I think they should. Okay,
yeah,
right. That sounds good. Now, up till this point, we have talked about what kind of questions in the interviews and how they should be answered. Now, we have approximately 6 minutes left. So, let's quickly also talk about what not to do in behavioral interviews. So, maybe if you could just give us some examples about the common mistakes which candidates do, and if they could just avoid them.
Right. So, I think there are a couple of common mistakes that I have observed, and I think that can be really improved. So, I mean, let's say during the technical session, and if there is a technical question that was asked, and and while the person is solving, let's say it's a coding problem, and you are walking through the implementation, or like suggesting an algorithm or something around that, and for example, the candidate has maybe not solved the problem successfully, or kind of stuck somewhere in the middle. Uh, and the interviewer goes in to suggest that maybe, maybe you want to review your solution, because it feels there is something wrong in there. Maybe that part is something not working right. So it's more like a tip to the a helpful tip to the candidate, that maybe there is not something right and you want to fix it. And that the interviewer is kind of encouraging the person to review their code. But on the other side, let's say if the candidate is like, no, I'm 100% sure that this is going to work fine, and they like are kind of in a situation जहाँ पे वो अपना code को review ही नहीं करना चाहते हैं, because they just say कि this is right and this is gonna work 100% of the time. Um, so I think this probably is not a good indication in a certain way. कि like even though आपको, they're trying to tell you like where the you can improve it, and you really don't want to pay attention to that, or you don't think that, that fix can be made. um, so that is probably, I would say, one area where somebody needs to really, think through it. um, there are other I mean, common things that can be also improved. For example, um, like being honest in, like, let's say कि अगर आप टेक्नोलॉजीज सर्टेन एरियाज में काम करना चाहते हैं, और वहाँ उसका जॉब में वो ऑफर नहीं हो रहा है आपको, तो आई मीन यू कैन जस्ट बी ऑनेस्ट, एंड आई मीन यू शुडंट बी इन दैट इंटरव्यू इन द फर्स्ट प्लेस, मगर अगर आप हैं भी एंड देयर आर सर्टेन थिंग्स दैट यू डोंट नो, यू कैन जस्ट टेल देम मे बी यू आर नॉट इंटरेस्टेड इन डूइंग दैट, ताकि expectations aligned रहे आपकी भी. So the interviewer also do not get a false idea कि आप ये कर सकते हो या ये कर चुके हो, या you are not able to demonstrate it for some reason. So I think being honest to any question that comes to you, that's, I think, another important thing. Um, like also there are a couple of other like during in technical engineering sessions, one of the ability that जो interviewer देख रहे होते हैं अक्सर was more like कि आप, if you are able to learn. I think we have talked this before, um, but I think being flexible to learn a new technology or new tool, that's also important. Because there are times जब project to project changes होती हैं, या any product changes, या कोई नई dimension आती है, your ability to learn something quickly or catch up on that thing is important. So I think, I mean, having or showing that ability that you are able to take new challenges is important. And I think, that is something that during the interview, highlighting that is important. Um, so I think most of these issues are around that. And also one more important thing, that जब भी आपका टेक्निकल इंटरव्यू होता है, इट्स वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट कि आप अपने टेक्निकल एरियाज को ब्रश अप कर लें, या रिव्यू रिवाइज करके चले जाएं. I mean, I know that we all study, and we all know, or we have gone through like data structures, or sorting किस तरह होती है, but it's always a good idea to review के आप के टेक्निकल एस्पेक्ट्स जो जो आपने स्टडी किए हैं, लाइक आप उसको रिव्यू करके जाएं, ताकि यू एंड अप giving a good interview. Like, there are a lot of times when जब आप इंटरव्यू में आते हैं, and then आप like you कहते हैं कि यार मैंने ये पढ़ा था, अब तो मुझे याद नहीं. I think it's not really help. It doesn't help much at that point, um, because the interviewer probably is trying to really understand कि आपकी कितनी technical understanding है, या आप इस problem को कैसे solve करेंगे. And there are probably like so many more tips, but I mean there was one last tip that I can highlight. Um, अगर आप कोई टेक्निकल प्रॉब्लम सॉल्व कर रहे हैं तो यू कैन रीड योर माइंड, आई मीन रीड योर माइंड आउट लाउड. बेसिकली दैट मीन्स कि आप क्या सोच रहे हैं, कि आपने लेट्स से यू आर गिवन अ प्रॉब्लम, एंड देन यू आर वॉकिंग थ्रू द थिंकिंग स्टेप्स, जो आप सोच रहे हो कि अच्छा मैं इस प्रॉब्लम को इस तरह से डिवाइड कर रहा हूँ सर्टेन पीसेस के अंदर, और ये चार सेक्शंस हैं, ये चार सेक्शंस इस तरह से इम्प्लीमेंट होंगे, एंड यू कैन वॉक देम थ्रू जो आपका थॉट प्रोसेस है, सो दैट द इंटरव्यूअर इज एबल टू बेटर अंडरस्टैंड कि लाइक आप किस तरह से लाइक प्रॉब्लम सॉल्विंग को थिंक थ्रू करते हो, या प्रॉब्लम को किस तरह थिंक थ्रू करते हो इन द फर्स्ट प्लेस. सो आई थिंक दैट आल्सो हेल्प्स अ लॉट.
Right. Yep. So those are definitely some great tips, Manip. Now I think we have to end our session. It's almost an hour now, but before we do that, I hope that we have been able to cover important questions in behavioral interviews, and hopefully you guys will be able to do much better when the actual interviews are happening. These sessions are going to be available on our page, so if you want to revisit it, you can listen to the recording. And if you do want to ask questions again, feel free to post comment in the comment sections, and we'll be quicker to respond. Thank you so much, Maneem, for taking out the time. The session was really insightful, and I really, loved how this conversation was, and really liked chatting with you. So, thank you so much. Would you like to say one last thing to the audience before we end the live session?
Yeah, so thank you again, Tuba. It's nice. And yeah, one last thing that I can add, like we have also open positions in the company, and like if there's any question about the session, they can reach out to me directly, or through the chat session, or from the Slack channel, or directly at my email address. So I think I would encourage people to really ask any question they want to have. We also have set up mock interviews, so they can join the mock interview sessions, and we can walk through them some of the tips and tricks together. And yeah, I think so far so good. Thank you very much.
Yep, definitely. We'll share your LinkedIn as well. So anyone who wants to reach out to Munib, they can also drop a message and just give the reference of this session, and he'll respond to you. So thank you so much, Munib, and thank you so much, everyone. Have a good day.
All right, thank you everyone. Bye.